Tony D and Little Joan with another installment of, I guess this is comic economic. Because some people in the comment section still seem to be, excuse me, confused about how this industry works. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Thanks for checking out the Pineys, books 1 through 13, available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. Okay. So, first, let me state again, I like the guys in general who are in this current drama of indie comics. Eric July, Yellow Flash, and Ethan Van Sciver's. They were allies. You'll notice that they fought against the SJWs, and for that, I'm like, yeah, let's all put these woke tards in their place. Unfortunately, the moment the SJWs seem to be sidelined, and they're not quite sidelined yet, but they're certainly on their way out the door, these guys started fighting with each other, and it's completely unnecessary. Who's to blame? You can argue those details. I'm not interested in arguing those details. I think they should all stop. They should all just stop yelling at each other. Some of them have. Some of them have pulled back. And good for you, those of you who pulled back. Ignore it. It'll all fade away. But to those of you coming at me in the comments, because you know so much about comics, let me explain to you 3 basic comic book concepts. Okay? The first concept is your regular comic, your reader comic. That is a comic that was published by Marvel and DC back in the day, and people read it because they were following the story. Now, did they follow the art? Yeah. But they would endure bad art for that story because they needed to know what happened next. And that was the majority of the comics for a long time. At some point, probably starting in the early 90s, we transitioned out of that mode into collectible mode. What is collectible comics? Collectible comics are comics where the story doesn't matter. People buy them because they think A, they'll be valuable down the road, or B, they're just caught up in the trend. Now, I'm not going to mention any names, but most of the comics I see coming out, and definitely at Marvel and DC, are just collectible comics. They might as well be Funkos. They might as well just have blank pages and no dialogue. Because people are barely following the story. How do I know that? People don't talk about the stories. I just did a comic book convention. No one talked about comics. So, yeah, you think you know this industry, you don't. The guys who are left, who are doing all this arguing, by the way, are mostly collectible guys. You guys are collectible junkies. Mostly. A few of you are old holdouts. A few of you desperately want a good story and keep buying them, hoping the story gets better. But eventually you'll figure out France and Japan are doing that, and you'll jump ship really quick from American comics. There's not a lot of great stories coming out of American comics, and that's just the reality of it. For the sheer volume of stuff that's being produced, especially on the indie scene, it's mostly crap. It's mostly the same damn thing. It's guys writing stories about themselves, being a sad, depressed artist. There's superhero stuff, of course. People wanting to do their own version of Batman or Daredevil or the Hulk or Captain America or whatever. You know, and on it goes. I don't have to tell you if you buy comics. You know it. You're desperately looking for something new and unique. Have you found it? Well, it's tough to find. I wanted to buy some comics at the show I just went at, but was kind of too busy selling stuff. There wasn't a lot there to buy in terms of new product. So the prices of these comics are astronomical. They're astronomical. They're not high, they're astronomical for the average normie. If you want to get regular people, or at least some regular people, into this medium, you need to lower the price. Now, again, people came at me in the comments saying, oh, well, when you calculate $25 to $35 over a period of time, it's one comic, dude. That's too much money. $35 comic should be hardbound, probably from France, and over 100 pages. Over 100 pages. Probably closer to 200. And it should be gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And you can get books like that. Italy, too. Some Japan. Depends on if you like manga. You have to look to those countries that have successful business models to what comic books should be. People in Japan read comics. They collect them too, but they read them because they grind them out, baby. The volume is huge. And most of them are black and white, printed on newsprint. Oh, newsprint, you say? Oh, I'm too fancy a comic fan for newsprint. Well, good. Keep your $35 comic then, and your niche hobby that only 10,000 people are going to really be involved in. That's the reality. If you're going to keep the price that high, you're not going to get kids into this. And when most of you people die off and the old timers from the previous eras die off, yeah, there's not going to be anybody making these things. It's going to be more guys like Yellow Flash and Eric July, essentially amateurs just trying to jump in because they like comics. And they're making mistakes, but I don't hold it against them. They're amateurs. They don't understand this business. Ethan Van Sciver, I would hold to a higher bar. I think he's making a big mistake going after Flash. Enough is enough, dude. You made your point. I think continuing to do this and going after Eric is not helping the industry. Now, it's helping Ethan. I mean, he's doing super chaps. I hear it's gangbusters over there on his podcast. But that's going to end. The moment the drama's done, that all ends. And does he come out of it ahead? Maybe. I don't know. But that's not going to help Yellow Flash's artist, Dillard, who he said he wants to help, and he did help. He got a bunch of guys together, made sure his Dillard's kids had Christmas, but Dillard is more responsible for his situation than anyone else. Hate to say it. That's just my opinion. And you could argue, well, that wasn't a fair contract. Well, I think it's pretty realistic that Flash will make that money on his comic had it come out without all this drama. Now, I don't know. Ethan's pretty influential in the comic book community. If he killed it, well, Dillard ain't going to make much money. That's just the math. But none of this even matters. Because there's only one kind of comic we need. And that's the third kind. And that's the most important kind. And that's the kind none of these guys have. And that's not a criticism against them. I'm not saying they're bad people. But they don't have it. And it is a phenomenon. You have to have a phenomenon of a comic. A comic that it just explodes on the scene at the right time. And no one can predict these things. William Goldman, the patron saint of screenwriters, said, no one in Hollywood knows anything. That goes doubly and triply true for everybody in the comic book industry. They know nothing. They don't know what's going to be a hit. They can guess. They can make educated guesses. But the normal pattern of behavior before publishing lost its mind would be to launch multiple titles either in an anthology or separately, and see which one became a phenomenon. And odds are, if you launched enough, one of them would be a huge hit and possibly a phenomenon. There's hits and then there's phenomenons. Venom is a phenomenon. But that's not the comic I'm going to talk about. But Venom is a phenomenon, right? He was introduced and just sort of organically came out of various ideas and then became so insanely popular, the company just, hyper focused on it for a while. Harley Quinn, same deal. Same deal. But indie guys can have phenomenons too. And I worked with guys who had a phenomenon on their hands. And they still do. And it's called Knights at a Dinner Table magazine. That's the current name. It's called Knights at a Dinner Table. And some of you might go, I've never heard of this comic. How could this be? How could this be a phenomenon? Some of you go, oh yeah, I know that comic. I've heard that name. Knights at the Dinner Table, let me tell you the origin story. The creator, Jolly Blackburn, was doing a gaming magazine, and because he's an RPG guy, a gamer. His associates are all hardcore gamers. He wanted to make a gaming magazine, but he also wanted, as is tradition in gaming magazine, to have a cartoon in the back, about gaming, something related to gaming. So he held a bit of a contest, asked people for submissions. He didn't really like most of the submissions he got. So he said, well, I've got some extra space. Let me just do one. Jolly will be the first to tell you he's not an artist. And if you go right to the Knights at a Dinner Table site and look at the art, you'll be like, what? If you're a comic book guy. You probably won't even understand it. And what happened was the comic strip became basically more popular than the magazine. Jolly eventually, because there was such a demand, said, you know what? I'm going to put out a comic too. So he did. And it was a huge hit. The first issue. And you have to understand this is a black and white comic drawn by a guy who fully admits he can't draw. And most of the characters, when he wants to turn a character's head, because the characters sit around playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's the comic, by the way. Them talking about what they're doing. Not actually them doing anything. So when he wants to move a character's head from this way to that way, he literally cuts out the head in Photoshop and flips it around. So he doesn't have to redraw them. There's virtually, hardly any original art to Knights at a Dinner Table. And in fact, Jolly doesn't go to shows and do sketches. He'll sign books, but he doesn't do sketches. He's probably not a practiced enough artist to do sketches. He might do them now after, they got to be over 200 issues at this point. But the comic's amazing. And the reason it's amazing is twofold. Number one, the story. The story really hits a chord if you used to play Dungeons and Dragons. If you played any kind of those role-playing games, you will love Knights at the Dinner Table. Because it's all about that. And the characters are 100% dedicated to their game and gaming. And there's not much outside that world. You see some of the corners of that world sometimes, but mostly it's all about gaming. And it's a phenomenon. It exploded. It did so well, the gaming magazine went away, and the comic book survived and helped Jolly survive over the years. And he eventually drew in with some guys who had a company, and they made it even bigger. And during the early to mid 2000s, I was involved with them. Great guys. And the comic was just, you cannot imagine how many comics we sold at Gen Con and other gaming cons. I mean, we brought in so much money at Gen Con one year. We had one of those bank bags for money, and we couldn't put all the money in it. So Someone took a trash bag out of a waste paper basket, and we threw the money in a trash bag. And then one of the guys said, "Tony, you have to walk with us." I'm like, "Why?" "Well, we're going back to the hotel, and I think we have about $20,000 in cash." Yeah, it was big, huge, huge. It was so big that at gaming conventions, the event to promote Knights at the Dinner Table was to bring the fans into a room for a reading. And what we would do is we would pick out fans to read the parts of the various characters, and up on stage would be a table and Dungeons and Dragons stuff, although they call it Hackmaster in the cartoon. And they would read out the various parts to their favorite strips. Their favorite strips. Not new strips. No, 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 no. Classic Knights at a Dinner Table. 500 people would show up to that event. Easy. He was a rock star, the creator. Jolly Blackbird. They are still publishing Knights at a Dinner Table today. It's called Knights at a Dinner Table magazine. They expanded it more into a magazine because they really want to push their games. But their comic book is insanely successful. And I was involved because they published some of my comics. And a friend of mine, he also got involved too. He was publishing comics there. And for a while, they did the Dungeons and Dragons comic, and they've done a bunch of gaming stuff that, unless you're into gaming, you probably wouldn't have heard of it. But that comic is a phenomenon. It hit just at the right time. There was nothing like it. The fan base was ravenous for it. I mean, ravenous for it. And it was printed on newspaper. The paper's fine. Newspaper's fine if you get halfway decent quality. The early issues are worth God knows how many hundreds of dollars. And the reprints, oh my God. I used to do pretty good selling their reprints at comic book shows. And they had dozens of them. Collected editions of about 10 or so issues. And comic book guys who are into superheroes and high-end art, they would take one look at this thing and go, "I can't even read this." The stories are hilarious if you're a Dungeons and Dragons player. And it was a whole niche market that had been untapped for comics. And to this day, they still sell tons of the thing. They still do very well. They don't do as much as they did in their peak, I don't think, but they do very well. They still are known in gaming circles all over the place, and I'm sure they're making tons of games. I haven't caught up with them in a while, but yeah, they do very well for themselves. It's a phenomenon of a comic. Was that comic embraced by the comic book community? No. Not really. I told people about it all the time, and they would just be like, "What? That's not the comic I'm used to. Well, that doesn't appeal to me. And it looks weird. Therefore, get away from me with your strange comic." It's a great comic. It's a phenomenon. That's what the indie comic scene needs. It needs a phenomenon. Something that people love so much, they're ravenous for it. That they will show up to a gaming con just to see old stories about it read. And part of the appeal of the Knights at the Dinner Table is, besides the fact there are many different characters in it now, dozens of them, the stories are often short, pointed. So when you get a comic, you get 4 or 5 stories, sometimes little backup stories, very short, 1 page. Where are those? Simpsons did it. I worked for the Simpsons comics. But a lot of comic guys aren't even doing that kind of stuff. They're not doing backup stories, or they're so fancy with their color and their paper and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, it's just it's okay. Yeah, does it look good? Yeah, it looks really good. Well, how about the story? So what the indie comic scene needs is a phenomenon. Jack Kirby, pretty much everything he did was a phenomenon. It's quite amazing, with a couple exceptions. He was just that creative, I guess. The Fantastic Four, I would say, would be his phenomenon. It was, read it. Read the Jack Kirby's Fantastic Fours and tell me if you can put it down. Tell me you get to the end of that and you don't want to read the next issue. Go ahead. This is the problem with the current day comics. It's always been that problem. I've been saying it for decades. They don't listen to me, but okay. You don't have to listen to me. I mean, some of these guys now, here's how it happened in the old days. Indie comic guys would emerge in the 90s. They'd take about 5 to 10 grand, throw it into a comic book company, print a few books, make a bunch of pronouncements about how they're going to take over the industry, how they're doing it. They're doing it for themselves and all that kind of stuff. And they'd peter out in about a year and a half. Usually when they got to about their third or fourth issue, they'd be out of money. They couldn't sustain it. Oh, the first issue sold pretty good. Then they got to the second issue. Hey, and nobody's buying all this merchandise we made, too. Well, I bought some of it sold, but not enough to justify the expense of making this damn stuff. And 2 years later, they'd be gone and be another guy doing the same exact thing. And that was the pattern. Now we have a different pattern. With the crowdfunding, some of these YouTubers, well, they can get some real money behind them. And for a while, they can sustain themselves. How are they going to sustain themselves if their channels go under? YouTube is very likely to purge a whole bunch of people because of their politics. Then you'll all be starting over on Rumble. I already got my Rumble channel set up, creeping up to 500 subscribers soon. They should all be over there. I think a few of them are. But comic books are different. You know, if you want to make a collectible, I'm not faulting it for you on that. If you want to make the paper equivalent of a Funko or Beanie Baby, okay. But no one's following that story. They're buying it because they're going to go, ooh. And they might read it, but they're going to go, ooh, I hope I can resell this. Yeah, that's not comics. That's collectibles. And a lot of these guys are going to learn a hard lesson. If you're going to make a collectible, they're only as good as when they're hot. And when people perceive they can't resell them for more than they paid for them, and a lot of them won't be able to do that, they bail. They say, oh, I got to get my money back. And then they just sell it for whatever. I mean, I got this Alpha Core and these Isom. I'll probably just sell them on eBay. I don't care what I get for them. If I get $5 a pop for them, I'll be fine with that. What do I care? They're not important to me because the stories aren't that important. I did like Alpha Core, but not an important story. Not yet, anyway. Maybe I'll keep that one. I don't know. I do like Chuck Dixon's work. But like Mike Barron, creator of Badger, oh, I wouldn't part with my Badgers. I think I'm still missing a couple in the run, but Badger, I love Badger. Wouldn't part with it. Would not part with it. So, you gotta have comics that people love. If they don't love them, you're just selling Funkos. And a lot of the guys coming at me in the comments who think they know something about publishing, okay, you know so much, go do it. We'll see if you do well. I hope you do. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. You know the math so well. See if you could sell $20 to $35 comics on the reg after your first issue. Yeah, you'll probably sell the first one if you blow a lot of money getting a good artist. Then talk to me at issue 2 when your sales go whoop into the toilet and you're trying to convince everybody, no, there's more story, there's more here. Yeah, unless you hit on a phenomenon, you're probably going to be out by issue 3. By issue 3, you're going to be like, oh man, we can't sell these. Nobody's interested after issue 1. That's because the whole market has turned into collectibles. People don't read the damn stories. Think on this. what percentage of Eric July, Yellow Flash, and Ethan Van Sciver's audience do you think actually read the comic, and what percentage just seals it in a bag and hopes that it's worth money and to resell it online? What percentage? Is that percentage 0? I bet it's not. I bet that percentage is north of 10. Yeah. And then there are guys who like to buy 2 copies of everything. Oh, I'll read one and then the other I'll seal away. That's a collectible. That's not a story. Nobody did that when Spider-Man came out. Or the Fantastic Four. Or Superman, for that matter. They were there to be read. We have to have comics to be read. In order to do that, we need writers. And we need people who can pick out a phenomenon when it happens. Now, I think Eric July can change course. He's got the money. He seems to have some resources. I think he could do well for himself if he changes course sooner rather than later. Ethan, I don't know if he'll ever change course. He's a one-man operation. Probably won't. He's making enough money. But you have to ask yourself, you know, if Ethan stopped making Cyberfrog today, would anybody care? That's an issue. Would anybody care after, I'll say, immediately people would care. But let's say 2 years go by. Would anybody care? Would anybody care if Todd McFarlane ended Spawn today and started a new comic? Would anybody care about those old issues of Spawn? Probably not. They're not phenomenons. And I'm not knocking them. I'm not saying every comic has to be a phenomenon, but you have to talk about these things in realistic terms. Okay? There are things that will endure and things that won't. If you're pursuing collectability and the hot comic thing, that is not a path to enduring anything. It is a path to money, though, which is not necessarily a bad thing. People need money to live. So I'm not knocking these guys for making a collectible that people want, at least in the moment. But if we're going to talk big talk, like we're going to save the comic book industry, that's not going to save the comic book industry. What will save the comic book industry are good stories and good art and a price point that makes sense. So that's my point. It's not to dig at Eric July or Ethan Van Sciver or Yellow Flash or Todd McFarlane or any other creator. They do that. I don't begrudge them anything. None of them, to my mind, have misled fans or done anything, any shenanigans that are dishonest that I'm aware of in any way. So I'm not saying they're being dishonest or, you know, they're trying to do their best. I think they all genuinely want to do their best. But if you want to save the comic book industry, if you want to have an industry at all, you need phenomenons. You need story-based comics. And you must embrace them when they come. They did not embrace Knights of the Dinner Table. Although, some people knew, the editors at DC Comics knew Knights of the Dinner Table was an amazing comic because they asked the creator, Jolly Blackburn, to write an issue of the Justice League. Yes, or at least a story. I don't know if it was going to be a whole issue. He called me up one day and said, "What is the Justice League?" And I told him what it was. And he said, "Why are you asking me this?" He's like, "Well, the editors at DC want me to do an issue or a story in the Justice League like Knights of the Dinner Table." I'm like, "Oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. You're going to do it, right?" And he's like, "I don't know." So, you know, the editors at DC knew back then. That was years ago. That was like 20 years ago. They knew its greatness and its popularity. We need to embrace greatness. And greatness comes in many forms. It's not just about money. It's not just about art. Okay? So, those of you in the comments section, calm the F down. So, here's my response to you: calm the F down. Okay? You don't know what you're doing. If you publish a comic, yeah, come back at me. Come back at me and tell me your experience and tell me the numbers. Tell me how that went talking to the printer. Tell me how that went negotiating with the artist. Tell me all your sad stories. Yes, you're going to learn the hard way. Or you could listen to, I don't know, somebody who's done it a bunch of times. You need to fix this industry. If you want to fix it, you need money and you need good stories. And you have to promote those good stories until you find the phenomenon. And once you find the phenomenon, once you find your Batman or your Spider-Man or your whatever, you use that as the tip of the spear to launch the other comics. And to be a publisher, you have to be a bit heartless. You have to recognize this comic isn't working. We have to cancel it. This comic is working. We have to go forward with it. Even if the comic, you don't even particularly like it. You have to be able to recognize where the fans are. Okay? The fans are, I think it's pretty obvious. The fans are not at Marvel. They're not at DC. Where are they? Well, they're kind of floundering around looking for something. They're looking for a hero. And I mean that in both senses of the word. I mean that in terms of the characters, but also the creator too. They're looking for a hero, someone they can look up to. I don't think any of the people I mentioned are those heroes. They're good in their own ways, but until they come together and, maybe stop doing all this petty BS and drama, it's just going to be more drama because it's like, oh, look at my subscriptions gone way up. Oh, look at all my super chats. And you can make money doing that. I don't want to make money doing that, just for the record. I have made some money doing that, but I'm not drama farming. I'm trying to be entertaining. I'm trying to talk about real things. And the problem with doing that versus drama farming is you quickly run out of the real, because there's only so much you can say about the math here. You make the comic for as cheap as possible, and then you sell it for as cheap as possible while still making a profit. That's it. That's the formula. Surprise! Look at that. I didn't need a 2-hour stream to tell you that. You add up what the cost, and then you double it, and that's the money you have to make. It's pretty simple. Can you sell in enough volume to make it work? That's the question. You need to spend money in advertising. And it's all a risk. It's all a risk. And again, no one knows anything. And that's it for me, Tony D, and Little Joan. Check us out on Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble for our more base takes. If you can find a more base take than that, I say take it. I'll be at Valenzano Winery in Chemung, New Jersey on Friday from 4 to 6. You can come yell at me in person. Hope to see you there, but not yelling at me. See you in the next one.